When a billionaire arrived home unannounced, he expected to find his kids playing with their toys, not calling the maid mommy. Flushed-faced, what he saw in that garden changed everything he thought he knew about love, family, and his late wife's last wish. This story will break your heart, and heal it too. Broken Heart Sparkles. It was a quiet morning at the Lancaster mansion, the kind of calm that felt almost sacred. The sun was just beginning to rise over the gardens, spilling gold over the marble fountains and trimmed hedges. Birds sang from the trees, and the household staff moved silently through the halls, following their usual morning routine. But that peace didn't last. Within minutes, the calm was shattered by the thunderous whirring of helicopter blades slicing through the sky. Everyone looked up. The guards rushed outside. The maids froze in the hallway. Even the gardener dropped his shears. Because there was only one helicopter that ever landed there, and it belonged to the man who owned not just the mansion, but half the city. Alexander Lancaster. A name that carried power and fear. No one expected him that day. Not the guards, not the staff, and especially not her. Billionaire Alexander Lancaster, one of the most powerful men in New York, had been away for almost 3 months, handling business mergers, investor meetings, and board takeovers across Europe. His official return was supposed to be next week. The mansion had been preparing for it, deep cleaning, redecorating, planning a formal welcome for him and his guests. But that morning, with no calls and no notice, Alexander decided to come home, unannounced, and not for business, but for something far more personal. Inside the helicopter, Alexander sat quietly as the city skyline disappeared behind him. His face, sharp and unreadable, showed no sign of fatigue, but his eyes told another story. They looked tired, lonely. Next to him lay a small wooden frame, a photo of 3 smiling children, Liam, Luke, and Lily, his triplets. They were 6 years old now, his pride and his greatest weakness. They were all he had left after tragedy struck his life 2 years ago. His wife, Eleanor Lancaster, had passed away unexpectedly. Her death left a void in him so deep that even the wealth he had built, the empire he had created, couldn't fill it. Since then, Alexander buried himself in work. He stayed away from the mansion, traveling endlessly, convincing himself it was all for his children's future. But deep down he was running away, running from the memories that haunted those marble halls. As the helicopter began to descend, he looked out the window at the sprawling estate below, the manicured lawns, the fountains, the giant oak tree his wife once loved. He remembered her laughter echoing under its branches. He remembered her voice saying, "Promise me, Alex, no matter how busy you get, never let work take you away from what truly matters." He had promised, but he hadn't kept that promise. The aircraft touched down on the private helipad beside the mansion. Dust and petals swirled through the air as the rotor slowed. The guards sprinted out to greet him, startled and unprepared. "Mr. Lancaster, we weren't expecting you, sir," one of them stammered. Alexander didn't reply. He just gave a curt nod, his sharp blue eyes scanning the property. Everything looked perfect, polished, almost too perfect. He grabbed his briefcase and stepped out, his shoes clicking against the stone path. His tailored suit looked immaculate, his expression unreadable. But there was something restless about him, a heaviness in his steps, a quiet urgency in the way he walked toward the mansion doors. He didn't tell anyone he was coming, not even the one person who had become the heart of this home in his absence. Her name was Clara. She wasn't just any maid. She had been with the Lancaster family since before the triplets were born. She was there when Eleanor went into labor. She was there when the babies took their first steps. And when the family lost Eleanor, Clara became the children's constant light in the darkness. She cooked their meals, taught them to tie their shoes, stayed up through their fevers, and comforted them through their nightmares. Every laughter that echoed through the halls these past 2 years came from Clara's patience, her songs, her warmth. In the absence of their mother, she had quietly become their everything. But to Alexander, she was just the maid. At least, that's what he told himself. As he entered through the tall glass doors, the familiar scent of jasmine and coffee hit him, the same scent Eleanor loved. For a brief moment, it almost felt like she was still there. But then he realized something strange. The house was unusually quiet. There was no sign of the usual morning routine, no footsteps, no chatter, no piano lessons echoing from the East Hall. He frowned. "Where is everyone?" he muttered under his breath. He loosened his tie and began walking through the marble hallway. His polished shoes echoed sharply with every step. As he passed by the children's playroom, he noticed something that made him stop. On the table lay a drawing, crayon and paper, messy and colorful. 3 children, holding hands with a woman. And above them, written in big, uneven letters, "Me, Luke, Lily, and Mommy Clara." Alexander froze. His chest tightened. Mommy Clara? He picked up the paper, staring at it in disbelief. Just then, he heard laughter coming from the garden, soft, genuine, innocent laughter. His children's laughter. He followed the sound quietly, moving through the corridor until he reached the glass doors leading to the backyard. And there, under the giant oak tree, was a sight that stopped him cold. Clara sat on the grass in a simple white dress, her hair tied loosely, a smear of paint on her cheek. Around her sat Liam, Luke, and Lily, his triplets, all covered in color and joy. Lily was painting something on a canvas, while Clara guided her tiny hands. Luke was chasing a butterfly with a jar, and Liam was pretending to be a pilot with a paper hat. They were laughing, alive, and full of light. And through it all, he heard them calling her something he never expected. "Mommy, look what I made." "Mommy Clara, come see mine." Alexander's briefcase slipped from his hand and hit the floor. The sound made everyone turn. The children gasped and ran to him, shouting, "Daddy." But Alexander didn't move. His eyes stayed locked on Clara, who had gone completely still, her face pale as snow. For a long moment, silence filled the garden. Only the wind rustled the leaves. Finally, Alexander spoke, his voice low and shaking with disbelief. "Mommy," he repeated, almost whispering. They call you Mommy?" Clara swallowed hard, her eyes glistening with fear. "Mr. Lancaster, it's not what it looks like." But it was too late. In that single moment, something inside Alexander cracked, a mix of shock, confusion, and an emotion he couldn't yet name. He had come home to surprise his family. But instead, he was the one surprised. And what he had just seen would change everything. As Alexander stepped through the grand entrance of his mansion, something immediately fell off. The house was too still. No echo of hurried footsteps, no clinking dishes from a kitchen, no chatter between maids. Only silence. The Lancaster mansion was never silent, not with 3 6-year-olds running around. Alexander frowned, his polished shoes clicking on the marble floor. He loosened his tie and looked around the hallway. Even the butler's desk was empty. "Where's everyone?" he muttered under his breath, his voice echoing faintly. He checked the living room, empty. The kitchen, spotless. The library, not a sound. And then, faintly, through the open glass doors at the end of the corridor, he heard something that made him pause. A sound so soft and pure that it made his stern expression fade for a moment. Laughter. Children's laughter. It floated in from the garden, bright, carefree, familiar. His children's laughter. Something in him stirred. He hadn't heard that kind of laughter in months. Not through phone calls, not in videos the nanny sent, never like this. He walked toward the sound, his step slow, almost hesitant. Each echo of his shoes mixed with that laughter, 2 worlds colliding. When he reached the open glass doors, the morning sunlight hit him, warm and golden. And that's when he saw it. The sight that made him stop dead in his tracks. Under the shade of the old oak tree, the same one where he and his late wife, Eleanor, used to sit every Sunday, was Clara. She sat cross-legged on the grass, barefoot, in a simple white dress. Her brown hair was loose and wavy, falling softly around her shoulders. A small flower, probably placed there by one of the children, was tucked behind her ear. She was laughing. Not the polite smile she wore when serving tea or answering orders, but a real, unguarded laugh. Around her sat the triplets, Liam, Luke, and Lily. Liam had streaks of blue paint on his cheeks. Luke was holding a jar, trying and failing to catch a butterfly. and little Lily sat in front of Clara, her tongue sticking out in concentration as she painted something on a canvas propped against a picnic basket. The grass around them was scattered with toys, brushes, cookies, and half-eaten strawberries. It looked nothing like the disciplined routine of a billionaire's household. It looked like a family. For a second, Alexander just stood there, frozen in the doorway. He couldn't breathe, couldn't move. His eyes locked on the woman and the children, their laughter, their closeness, the warmth that radiated from that little scene. Something deep in his chest twisted. And then he heard it. The word that shattered his composure. "Mommy, look." Lily giggled, holding up her painting proudly. "Mommy, I caught it." Luke shouted, chasing after a butterfly with his net. Liam laughed, falling back onto the grass. "Mommy, Clara, Daddy's never going to believe I painted this." The world seemed to stop. Alexander's briefcase slipped from his hand and hit the floor with a loud, echoing thud. The sound sliced through the laughter like a blade. Clara froze. The children turned, startled, their eyes lighting up. "Daddy," they shouted in unison, running toward him. They wrapped their small arms around his legs, jumping and talking all at once. "Daddy, look what we made." "Daddy, Mommy helped us paint." "Daddy, you came home early." But Alexander didn't move. His arms hung by his sides, his eyes fixed on Clara. His voice came out low, controlled, but trembling slightly. "Mommy," he repeated, almost whispering. "They call you Mommy." Clara slowly rose to her feet. The color drained from her face. Her hands trembled as she brushed grass from her dress. "Mr. Lancaster," she began softly, her voice barely audible. It's not what it looks like." He took a slow step forward, his expression unreadable. "Not what it looks like," he said, his tone quiet but cutting. "Because it looks like my children, my triplets, are calling their maid Mommy." Clara's eyes welled with tears. She clasped her hands together tightly. "Please, sir. I can explain." "Then do," he said sharply. "Explain this." She took a breath, her voice shaking. "When their mother passed away, they were so small," she said. "They didn't understand what happened. Every night they cried for her. Every morning they asked where she was. I told them she was in heaven, but they were too young to understand loss, sir." She glanced toward the children, who were now watching from a distance, sensing the tension. "So I stayed with them," Clara continued. "I told them stories, sang to them, tried to make them feel safe. I never told them to call me that. They started doing it themselves." Alexander's jaw clenched. "And you let them?" Her voice cracked. "How could I stop them? Every time I tried to correct them, they cried for hours. They said, 'But you're here and Mommy isn't.' What was I supposed to do, sir? Push them away?" Tears slipped down her cheeks now, but she didn't wipe them. "I swear to you," she whispered, "I never wanted to replace her. I was only trying to keep them from feeling empty." Alexander stood still, his chest rising and falling heavily. He wanted to be angry, to shout, to accuse, but something inside him stopped. He saw the truth in her eyes. The kind of love you can't fake. The kind of devotion he himself had failed to give for so long. He looked past her to the children again, their bright eyes, their laughter still hanging faintly in the air, their paintings scattered across the grass. He realized that this was the first time in years they'd looked this happy. And the reason was standing right in front of him. But pride is a powerful thing. Alexander's heart softened, but his voice didn't. "Get the children inside," he said coldly. Clara hesitated. "Sir." "Now," he repeated. She nodded, swallowing hard. She called out gently to the triplets, forcing a smile. "Come on, my loves. Let's wash up before lunch." As the children ran ahead, still holding their paintings, Clara turned back toward Alexander one last time. "I'm sorry if I've overstepped," she whispered, "but I'd rather they feel loved than lonely." And with that, she walked inside, her white dress swaying softly behind her. Alexander stayed there in the doorway long after they were gone, staring at the empty garden. His hand tightened around the handle of his briefcase. He didn't know what hurt more, the shock of hearing his children call another woman Mommy, or the painful truth that maybe, just maybe, they had every reason to. Alexander's mind was spinning. The laughter from moments ago was gone, replaced by a sharp, echoing silence that seemed to hang heavy in the air. How long had this been happening? Why were his kids calling the maid Mommy? What kind of household had this become in his absence? Every question felt like a knife twisting in his chest. He stood there, frozen under the weight of confusion and betrayal, watching as Clara tried to gather the paints and brushes scattered on the grass. The triplets were still smiling up at him, unaware of the storm brewing behind their father's calm exterior. Alexander forced a smile and knelt down to their level. "Why don't you three go inside with Mrs. Rose?" he said softly. "Daddy needs to talk to Miss Clara for a bit." "Can Mommy come too?" Lily asked innocently, holding Clara's hand. Clara's heart sank at the word. She opened her mouth to correct her, but Alexander spoke first. His tone was gentle, but tight. "No, sweetheart," he said. "Mommy Clara will come later." He forced the words through gritted teeth. The children didn't notice his tone. They nodded cheerfully and ran off toward the house, their tiny shoes tapping against the stone path. As the door closed behind them, the air shifted. The warmth, the laughter, the innocence, all of it vanished. Only the sound of the wind in the trees remained. Alexander turned back to Clara, his jaw clenched, his eyes cold. "Explain," he demanded quietly but firmly. "Why are my children calling you that?" Clara froze. Her hands trembled as she held onto the small jar of paint. "Sir, she began, her voice weak. "They've been having nightmares. Missing their mother. I didn't mean to." Alexander's voice cut through her words like thunder. "You didn't mean to," he snapped, taking a step forward. "You took my wife's place in their hearts." The words came out louder than he intended. A few birds scattered from the nearby trees. Clara flinched. Tears instantly filled her eyes. "No, sir," she said, shaking her head. "I would never. I was only trying to comfort them. They started calling me that on their own. I never told them to." Alexander's expression hardened. "And you let them?" Clara looked down. "Because correcting them broke their hearts every time," she whispered. "They'd cry for hours. They'd say, 'But you're here and Mommy isn't.' So yes, I let them because it made them feel safe." For a moment, the world seemed to still. Alexander stared at her, really stared at her. The trembling hands, the tear-streaked cheeks, the fear in her eyes. But beneath all that, he saw something else. Love. Not romantic love. Not sympathy. But a quiet, selfless love. The kind only a mother figure could give. And that realization cut deeper than anything else. Because she was right. He hadn't been there when the triplets woke up crying for their mother. He hadn't been there when they learned to write their names or tie their shoes. He hadn't been there when Lily first said she missed Mommy so much it hurt. Clara had been there for all of it. He wanted to stay angry, wanted to hold on to his pride, his authority, his title as father and master of the house. But her words hit him harder than he expected. Still, pride is stubborn. Alexander folded his arms tightly, his voice low and icy again. "You crossed the line, Clara. You were supposed to care for them, not become their mother." Clara's breath hitched. "I know, sir. But what would you have me do? Let them cry alone every night? Pretend not to hear when Lily asked me to hold her, because she missed the smell of her mother's perfume? I couldn't, sir. I just couldn't." Her voice cracked completely now. "I only wanted to keep their hearts from breaking any more than they already had." Alexander turned away, running a hand through his hair, trying to calm the fire inside him. "You don't understand," he said through clenched teeth. "You can't just step into a role that isn't yours. Those children, they're mine." "I know they are," Clara said softly. "And they love you. They talk about you every day. Every time they hear a plane, they say, 'Daddy's coming home.' But they also need someone here. Someone who listens. Someone who stays." The words hit him like a blow. He swallowed hard, staring at the ground. "You think I don't care?" "I don't think that," Clara whispered. "I think you care too much, but from too far away." He turned sharply, his eyes flashing. Enough. The word was final. Cold. Clara took a shaky step back. "Sir, please." "Pack your things," he said, his tone flat now. "You're dismissed." Her lips parted in disbelief. For a second, She couldn't even breathe. Dismissed? She repeated softly. Sir, I'll make sure you're compensated for your service. You'll have enough to live comfortably for the rest of your life. But I can't allow this confusion to continue. Clara's heart cracked. Confusion, she whispered, tears falling freely now. Is that what this is to you? Because to me, they're not just children I look after. They're my life, sir. I've been there for every tear, every scrape, every nightmare. Her voice trembled as she spoke through tears. They don't see me as their maid anymore. They see me as someone who loves them. And I do. I love them more than I can explain. Alexander's jaw tightened. He couldn't look at her anymore. He turned his back to her, staring instead at the tree. The same oak tree where his wife once played with their kids. For a long, heavy silence, neither of them moved. Finally, Clara took a deep breath, wiped her tears, and whispered, If you really believe they'll be better without me, I'll go. Alexander said nothing. She picked up her basket, gathered the scattered brushes, and turned to leave. But before she stepped away, she looked back one last time. I never tried to take her place, sir, she said softly. But maybe God sent me to help fill the emptiness she left behind. And with that, she walked back toward the mansion, her white dress brushing against the grass, her figure growing smaller with each step. Alexander stood alone under the oak tree, the sunlight dimming behind him. He wanted to believe he was doing the right thing. But as the sound of the door closing echoed through the garden, an emptiness settled in his chest, heavier than before. He looked at the small painting Lily had left behind, still propped against the basket. It showed 4 stick figures, Liam, Luke, Lily, and Clara. And underneath, written in a child's shaky handwriting, were 4 words that tore through his heart. Our family is happy. That night, the Lancaster mansion didn't feel like a home anymore. It felt like an empty museum, full of expensive things, but completely lifeless. The laughter that once echoed through its halls had vanished. The triplets were quiet. Even the staff walked carefully, afraid to make a sound. In the grand dining hall, 3 untouched plates sat in front of 3 little chairs. Liam pushed his food away. Luke sat with his arms crossed. And little Lily, she cried softly, clutching Clara's favorite handkerchief. Daddy, she whispered through tears, when is Mommy Clara coming back? Alexander froze. He had no answer. He tried to comfort her, but she turned away, hugging her stuffed bunny instead. That broke something inside him. When the children finally went to bed, the mansion fell into a heavy silence. Alexander poured himself a glass of whiskey and went to his office, the one room where he could think, or at least pretend to. On the wall hung a large photo of his wife, Isabella Lancaster. Her eyes seemed to follow him, filled with warmth and grace. He stared at it for a long time. Did I do the right thing, Bella? He murmured. But of course, the photo said nothing. He sighed, rubbing his temples, guilt slowly creeping in. He remembered how Clara used to hum lullabies in the garden, how the kids' laughter would fill the air whenever she was around. And now it was all gone. Just as he reached for his drink again, a soft knock interrupted him. Come in, he said. The door opened. It was Mr. Harris, the family's butler for over 20 years. He looked uneasy, holding something in his hands. Sir, forgive me for disturbing you, he said quietly. But there's something you should see. Alexander frowned. What is it? Mr. Harris stepped forward and placed a brown folder on the desk. I found this in Madame Isabella's old chest. I thought it might be important. Alexander opened the folder and froze. Inside were several neatly folded letters, tied with a faded blue ribbon. He immediately recognized the handwriting. Isabella's. His heart pounded. He hadn't seen her handwriting in years. He picked up the first letter and began to read. Dear Clara, if anything ever happens to me, please promise you'll stay. The children love you, and you love them. You're the only one I trust to care for them when I can't. Tell them stories. Sing to them. Make sure they grow up happy, not lonely. Alexander will be lost without me for a while, but he'll find his way. Just don't leave them. Love, Bella. Alexander's breath caught in his throat. He sat back in his chair, stunned. He read another one, written a few weeks later. Clara, you have such a kind heart. I see how the children look at you. If one day they call you mommy, don't stop them. It means they feel loved again. And if Alexander ever doubts you, remind him that I chose you." By the time he reached the last line, Alexander's eyes were wet. He pressed the letters against his chest, whispering, "You knew you always knew." All those months he had spent blaming Clara, accusing her of stealing a place in his children's hearts. He realized she hadn't taken it. She had been given it, by the very woman he loved most. A deep ache filled his chest. The weight of guilt pressed down on him like never before. He remembered the look on Clara's face when he fired her, the quiet dignity in her eyes, even when her world fell apart. He had hurt not just her, but his own children. Suddenly, he couldn't sit still. He stood, grabbed his car keys, and told Mr. Harris, "Get the car ready." But the butler smiled gently. "Already waiting, sir." The drive to Clara's apartment felt longer than ever, even though it was only 20 minutes away. The city lights blurred as he sped through the rain-slick streets, his thoughts a storm of regret and realization. When he finally reached her small building, he hesitated for a moment at the door. It was humble, a simple 2-room apartment with a tiny porch, the kind of place that smelled like warmth and home. He knocked softly. The door opened, and Clara appeared, her eyes red, her face pale from crying. When she saw him, she froze. "Mr. Lancaster," she said quietly, "please, if you're here too." He cut her off, his voice softer than she'd ever heard. "Clara, I found the letters." Her lips parted, but no words came. She looked down, tears instantly welling in her eyes. "I shouldn't have fired you," Alexander continued, stepping closer. "I shouldn't have doubted you." He reached into his coat and pulled out one of the letters. "She trusted you, Clara. She chose you for them. And I was too blind to see it." For a long moment, there was silence. Only the soft sound of rain tapping against the windows. Then, something broke in her. Clara covered her mouth, trying not to sob. "I never wanted to replace her," she whispered. "I only wanted to protect what she loved most." Alexander's voice trembled. "And you did. You protected them and me." Then, something happened no one had ever seen before. The billionaire, Alexander Lancaster, bowed his head. "I'm sorry," he said quietly, "from the bottom of my heart." Clara shook her head, wiping her tears. "You don't have to apologize, sir." But he stopped her gently. "No, I do. Because I finally understand what love looks like. It's not just blood or marriage. It's care. It's sacrifice. It's you." She couldn't speak. Finally, he smiled faintly. "Please come home. The children need you." Her lips quivered. "And you?" He met her eyes, honest, sincere, full of gratitude. "I think I do too." As they stood there, the rain began to lighten outside, replaced by the soft golden hue of dawn. For the first time in years, Alexander felt something he hadn't felt since Isabella's passing: peace. And when Clara finally nodded and whispered, "Okay," it felt like the mansion, and their hearts, might finally become a home again. A week later, the Lancaster mansion felt alive again. The heavy silence that had hung over it was gone, replaced by laughter, warmth, and the sweet sound of children's voices echoing through the halls. Outside, the helicopter blades stirred the morning air once more, but this time, not with tension or surprise. This time, they marked a new beginning. As the sleek black helicopter touched down on the mansion's helipad, the triplets waited impatiently by the steps, their faces glowing with excitement. Lily held a bouquet of daisies in her little hands, her eyes scanning the sky. And then she saw her, Clara, stepping out of the helicopter with her humble grace, the wind dancing through her hair. She was no longer dressed in her maid's uniform. Instead, she wore a soft lavender dress and a gentle smile that spoke of both nerves and hope. "Mommy Clara," Lily squealed, breaking free from the butler's hand and running as fast as her tiny legs could carry her. Clara barely had time to kneel before the little girl threw herself into her arms. Liam and Luke weren't far behind. They tackled her from both sides, their laughter ringing out like music. "Careful, you three." Clara laughed through happy tears, hugging them tightly, as if afraid to ever let go again. Her heart raced, not from fear this time, but from love. from belonging. From the steps of the mansion, Alexander Lancaster stood watching quietly. For the first time in years, the billionaire wasn't thinking about stock prices, meetings, or power. He was thinking about his family, the one he had almost lost. Mr. Harris, standing beside him, whispered with a small smile, "Welcome home, sir." But Alexander didn't reply. He just nodded, eyes still fixed on the scene in front of him. When Clara finally looked up, their eyes met. He gave a faint smile, a silent message that said more than words ever could. "You belong here." Inside, the staff greeted her warmly. Every maid, every gardener, every cook, they all knew the mansion hadn't been the same without her. "Welcome back, Miss Clara," one of the housekeepers said. But Alexander gently corrected her. "Not Miss Clara," he said softly. Mrs. Lancaster wanted her treated like family. From now on, that's exactly what she is. Clara blinked, touched beyond words. "Thank you, sir," she whispered. That day was full of laughter and noise. The children followed her everywhere, showing her the drawings they'd made, the garden they had watered all by themselves, and even a butterfly jar Lily had kept just in case Mommy Clara came back. At lunchtime, the dining table, once so painfully quiet, was full of chatter again. Luke was telling a dramatic story about a dragon. Leah was trying to show Clara a magic trick that didn't quite work, and Lily kept feeding her breadcrumbs, giggling every time she said Mommy. Alexander watched silently, his heart swelling with something he hadn't felt in a long time: peace. He realized that in chasing success, he had almost lost the one thing that mattered most: love. That evening, as the sun dipped low behind the hills, they all gathered in the garden, beneath the same old oak tree where everything had changed. It stood tall and wise, its branches stretching wide, as if guarding the family beneath it. Clara sat on the blanket with the triplets beside her, a small guitar resting on her lap. The moment her fingers brushed the strings, the first soft notes of a lullaby filled the air. The same song Mrs. Lancaster used to sing every night before bed. The melody was gentle, timeless, and full of memory. Lily hummed along softly. Liam rested his head on her shoulder. Even Luke, the most restless of them all, sat quietly, watching the golden sky fade into pink and orange. Alexander stood a few feet away, his hands in his pockets, simply observing. And for the first time since his wife's passing, the pain in his chest didn't hurt quite as much. He felt her presence in that music, in the laughter of the children, in Clara's soft voice, in the way the evening light fell across their faces. Maybe, he thought, this was Isabella's plan all along, to make sure their children were never alone, to send someone who could love them just as fiercely as she did. He sat down beside them, his expensive suit brushing the grass, and the children's eyes lit up. "Daddy, sing with us," Lily begged. Alexander chuckled. "You don't want to hear your old man sing, trust me." But the triplets insisted, and soon even he joined in, his deep voice clumsy but full of warmth. Clara smiled, watching the family she had fought to protect finally come together again. When the song ended, the children lay back on the grass, pointing at the stars beginning to peek through the twilight sky. "That one's Mommy's star," Lily whispered. "She's watching us." Alexander looked up too, and for a moment he could almost feel Isabella smiling down at them. He turned to Clara and said softly, "Maybe this is what my wife wanted all along." Clara didn't answer, but her eyes said everything. Hours later, when the children were asleep, Alexander and Clara stayed outside, beneath the oak tree. The night was cool, the sky endless. "Clara," he said quietly, "I never got to ask, why did you stay all those years, even when things were hard?" She looked up at the stars. "Because love isn't about blood or titles, sir. It's about being there when someone needs you most. Your wife understood that. And now so do you." He nodded slowly. "I do." For a long time, they sat in silence, just listening to the gentle rustle of leaves and the faint laughter of the children drifting from inside the mansion. In that stillness, something sacred settled between them. Not romance, not duty, but family. From that day forward, Clara was no longer just the maid. She was family, heart, home, and love all in one. Every morning began with laughter. Every night ended with stories. The mansion that had once felt like